is expected to become a major hurricane within the next 24 hours, going through rapid intensification over the very warm waters of the southeastern Gulf of Mexico as it races northward, eventually making landfall in the panhandle in the Big Bend area, actually, of Florida as a category, get this, 4 hurricane with winds up to 130 miles an hour, wind gusts up past 160. Looks like sometime late Thursday. So a lot of folks are anxious right now all across the state of Florida and throughout Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, even into parts of Alabama tonight and Tennessee as a result of this major hurricane, soon to be major hurricane, which will be going through rapid intensification. If you're now joining us, we have teamed up with meteorologists across the Southeast United States, as we've been doing the last couple of nights. This is all part of the Gray Media Group, which is a group of television stations and also internet facilities across the United States, over 120 stations. And what better way to get a handle on what this storm is doing and kind of get more accurate information from experienced meteorologists across the Southeast. And again, we are going to be talking about this storm first. Now, joining me live on the, we call it the Media Roundtable, right? The Meteorologist Roundtable. We have Fred Capania, Atlanta, and you are at WANF. And we have Jamie Ertl, who's a regular now at WTOC in Savannah, Georgia. We appreciate you guys joining us, and we may have more people coming online. I see we have one listener, I think, from Michigan, all the way up in Michigan, kind of keeping an eye on things as well. This storm, I've got a graphic up right now, you guys, that is showing the satellite imagery and all the watches and warnings across Florida with the latest cone on it. This storm, as you guys have been following and broadcasting on your television stations, is going to become a rather large one, to say the least. And Fred, especially as I play the cone and move it into motion up into Georgia, something that very rarely happens there. Fred, why don't you talk a little bit about that and what it means for your viewers and the people watching right now across the digital world?
Absolutely, Bob, and thanks for having me on the roundtable this evening. And this is the word that I've been using a lot this week, has been unique, because this storm is going to take a track that we don't often see here in North Georgia. Typically, and I look back at 100 years worth of storm tracks, storms that do make landfall south of Tallahassee in that Big Bend area, if they're coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, almost all the time head through the southern part of Georgia and then into South Carolina or back out into the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere in the direction of where Jamie is in Savannah. And this is very unique to have a storm that is basically going to make landfall south of Tallahassee and then move straight to the north, take an overnight trip right up through the state of Georgia, going at about 30 miles an hour. And when we factor in that this is projected to be a Category 4 hurricane at landfall, this is about as close to a worst case scenario, I think, as we can get in North Georgia, in the Atlanta metro area. And to make matters worse, Bob and Jamie, we are getting what is called a predecessor rain event right now. Hartsfield-Jackson, most of us have been there at one point or another, even if we're just passing through, especially if you live in the Southeast, has already received 3 inches of rain today from a storm. Well, not directly connected to a storm. It's actually, and you guys know this, so we could talk about it, it's connected to the trough that is going to steer this storm in this very unique path and right up in our direction. And there is tropical moisture now feeding into that trough. We've seen heavy rain all day. We had a tornado warning earlier in northeast Georgia. 3 inches of rain already at Hartsfield-Jackson. The center of Helene is still about 750 miles south of Atlanta, and we will not feel the effects of the core of the storm until tomorrow night, and late tomorrow night, really, as far as the winds picking up in our area. So, as we spend time here on the roundtable, and I will get into more specifics about exactly what we're expecting here, Bob, but I think it's safe to say, we've been around for a little while. We've seen a lot of storms, and this one slightly different than what we've had in the past, especially when you consider the storms that have hit the Big Bend area over the last couple of years did not take the same type of track that this one is projected to.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's some interesting insight into this storm. A lot of people don't realize that they typically do bend off into the Atlantic when they reach the Panhandle and move through South Georgia. This one taking a different track because of that trough, and they're kind of doing a Fujiwara. I saw that a couple of times,
Hmm.
Fujiwara effect with a low pressure. That's where the two low pressure areas kind of dance around each other, and
Yeah.
this one's going to be drawn that way. This is amazing. It looks like an I-75 hurricane. Basically, it's going right up
It's it's
I-75.
crazy. Yeah, Georgia 400, right up through Atlanta. And yeah, the Fujiwara, it's like a little seesaw effect that happens with an area of low pressure dropping in behind the storm and kind of pulling it up to the north and then eventually to the northwest. The other thing is the speed of the storm. Moving at 30 miles an hour when it does get into Georgia, it is not going to have a lot of time to weaken. So crunch time, and I'm sure Jamie's going to want to weigh in on this as well, is the next 12 to 18 hours when this storm is over those really warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, and whether we see rapid intensification with this storm. A lot of the hurricane models are anticipating it. We're seeing some big numbers as far as max winds go on some of those hurricane models, Jamie. So this is the critical point here, I think, in the next 24 hours, because if it is in fact a major hurricane when it reaches the coast of Florida, it's big
You know,
problems, even
you know,
down
you know,
in Savannah area.
Fred, you mentioned that, category four, worst case scenario. The worst case scenario to me would have been, and it still could happen, it could become a category five prior to landfall. I mean, that's not
Yeah,
out of the question. And
absolutely.
the speed that it's moving, we have to be very concerned with our capital in Tallahassee, which looks like is going to take a direct hit. And the winds will be much stronger there. And I don't think I've ever seen a storm moving that fast, that strong, go into directly Tallahassee. So that's going to be interesting. Jamie, you are there, obviously in Savannah. You talked about yesterday, you're going to get that non-frictional effect wind wrapping
Yeah.
around into the storm. And obviously you've had rainfall and you were covering tornadoes yesterday. What's the status and what are you guys looking at?
I think a lot of people with that 5 o'clock advisory really started to pay attention who haven't been paying attention that the storm was still going to be a category one heading straight up Albany. Now, even though the cone and the hurricane force winds only extend out about 25 miles from the center of circulation, and that doesn't reach 75, this storm is as large as Georgia and South Carolina with tropical storm force winds extending out 345 miles, and that's well into the Atlantic. And when you have that wraparound moisture, that's when storms off the Atlantic gain strength, and that's why speeds from Baxley to Tybee Island will see 50 to 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts overnight. And we do actually have one county in our viewing area that is under a hurricane watch. And I saw some of the highest wind gusts in Jeff Davis County, Hazelhurst specifically. This is what we call blueberry country in Georgia. A few counties in our southernmost viewing areas do produce the most per capita blueberries in the state. But so when I reference that, we're talking about 79-mile-per-hour wind gusts in those specific areas. And it's still pretty high. It's a big swath. I was trying to tell people earlier in the forecast, kind of a week out, listen, we're going to have tropical storm force winds, but that's 39 to 73 mile per hour. That's a big difference. So now we're trying to hone in on those specific wind gusts throughout the coastal empire and low country. And we really want people to listen, even though still we've got people focusing on the cone and the track that's going up 75. To Fred's just talking about Atlanta weather, I looked last night because I have a really good friend who lives in Alpharetta, and I said, I looked for it because I haven't been focusing on Atlanta, of course. Y'all are going to get so much more rain than Savannah and South Carolina. We're talking about, we went high end on Monday, 3 to 5 inches. Now we've kind of scaled back to 2, maybe 4 in some places, especially in our Western communities. 10 inches in Atlanta. I mean, way, way higher than us.
Yeah, and
Like
you
I,
think
like
about
I
that.
said,
Yeah, Fred, you're absolutely right. And you just said you had 3 inches today. So go ahead, take it away. I'm focusing in right now with the rainfall graphic,
Yeah.
which shows
Mhm.
the accumulation of Atlanta showing their plus 9, 10 inches of rain.
Right. Yeah. And that's consistent among the computer models. And we were hopeful that the computer models were going to be a little bit overdone on their projections for the rain today, and they really weren't. So when you see the first part of the storm come to fruition like this, and you know that we're getting even more heavy rain overnight, that those 6, 8, 10-inch rainfall totals are going to be pretty common. I think that the unlucky few may get 15, 18 inches of rain over the next 36 hours or so as this storm gets closer and then passes by. Because as we know, when the core of a hurricane comes close, you can get 3-inch, 4-inch per hour rainfall totals that come as it's just absolutely torrential tropical rain. And Jamie, I want to harp on one of the things that you talked about, and I think it's so important with this for folks who live down in your area and just southeast of our area, which is the cone and being outside of the cone. So Athens right now, Georgia, outside of the cone. Augusta, Georgia, outside of the cone. Probably going to get some of the worst conditions in middle and north Georgia of anyone, because they're going to be on the eastern side of the storm. So not only do they run the risk of these isolated spin-up tornadoes, but looking at the computer models and the projected wind gusts, likely in many of those spots to get 65, 70, 75 mile per hour wind gusts coming through. So I think it's, you know, one of the things that we always talk about is like the specific impacts, you know, what's going to happen in your area. It's more than just that cone. It doesn't tell the entire story. And in some cases, being outside of the cone, just to the east of the cone with this storm moving north is actually worse than being on the left or western side of the cone when it comes to winds. And we're anticipating, even in Atlanta, you mentioned Alpharetta, northern suburb of Atlanta, in the metro, I think that many are going to see 50, 60 mile an hour winds. And to be honest, guys, when we get 40, 45 mile an hour winds after a couple of days of rain, we get a lot of trees that come down. So this could potentially be historic in terms of the number of trees that come down and the power outages that could, unfortunately, in some cases last for a while.
You know, that's so right. You know, it's interesting. And when I hear both of you guys speak about the storm and the impacts that could occur, I'm thinking, okay, you guys probably get worse than we get here along the west coast of Florida. And here we are, you know, right next to the storm, Category 4 storm. But in reality, more impacts, I think, are going to be felt across Georgia. And I think it will be a historic storm that will be retired, just based on what I'm seeing and the fact that it's heading toward a major metropolitan area. And as you said, not just the center, but the wide impact, Jamie, of the covering of the entire state of Georgia with tropical storm force winds. This is going to be a devastating storm for you. And we, on the other hand, the only thing we have to be concerned about here, that's the biggest concern, I should say, is storm surge. And we are under a storm surge warning. And that warning continues all the way up into the Big Bend area. And if you saw the 5 o'clock advisory, they have upped it now to a 20-foot storm surge expected near Appalachia Bay, all the way over to the Big Bend area. 20-foot storm surge. I don't think I've ever seen that except for Katrina, obviously, but not in Florida. Fort Myers with Ian had a 15-foot storm surge, and we lost 60 people because they failed to heed the warnings of the storm surge and the power of water. So as you said, Fred, I think people that focus on the cone, and you have to realize that Fort Myers wasn't in that cone for a while. You know, they say, well, I'm out of the cone, I'm okay. No, you're not, especially in this case, because everything seems to be here anyway, to the right of the center of the storm. So
let me touch on storm surge really quickly, because you talk about your storm surge on the west side of the Florida. We do have a 1 to 3 foot storm surge possibility in the coastal empire and low country. So that's Hilton Head all the way down to Brunswick, Georgia, which is right on the Florida-Georgia line. Tides are running about 7.5 feet. You add 2 feet to that, so that's 9.5 feet. Highway 80, which runs the road to Tybee Island, Georgia's beach, that would be just close to inundating the road out to the island. But we don't expect that. So anybody watching here on Facebook Live, we don't expect roadways to be impacted, but the marshes will be full. If you live on an island, if Whitmarsh, etc., those waters will be encroaching if you live right on the marsh.
So yeah, pretty amazing. We've already had evacuations for all of our barrier islands in this area, Sarasota, Manatee, and all throughout the Tampa Bay area. Evacuations level A, level B, voluntary in Manatee County. What that means is that, you know, they're worried about people getting in harm's way if they stay out on the islands. And my advice, if people are watching right now and you're out in the islands debating whether you should or should not stay, you should not stay. Of course, we always say run from the water, right? It's becoming an old cliche, it seems like, but there's a lot of truth to it. And as we talked about yesterday, it's the rainfall, the flooding, and it's going to be excessive. We had someone on yesterday, I believe, from South Carolina, and they were talking about the tremendous amount of flooding that's going to be happening in the mountains there into East Tennessee and western portions of South Carolina, that this is going to be catastrophic, if you ask me, in terms of why that low is just going to kind of hang around there too. And Fred, maybe you can touch on that fact that that low, although it won't be intense in 3-4 days from now, it's still going to be there enough to create rain and more flooding.
Well, thankfully, we're hopeful it'll be north of our area, so it'll just be scattered showers, and most of our rain from this is going to be over probably by about 9 o'clock on Friday morning. One of the things that I did want to speak to, though, is and we really hope that people do heed the warnings, because this is hitting an area that has seen a couple of storms in very, very recent memory. But this one could be different, a slightly different approach angle, a slightly different landfall location is possible. And don't take this the wrong way for any viewers that are from Florida, but Floridians tend to be somewhat of a different breed when it comes to hurricanes. And I was talking to a friend of a friend who was the mother of the bride for a Tallahassee wedding that was supposed to happen on Saturday. And I talked to them on Monday, and I said, look, I said, this one's probably coming more or less right up over you or just to your west, and it could be strong. Oh, we're just here in Category 2. And I said, I don't know if I would be going forward with this. And I said, the storm's going to be long gone by Saturday, but so may a lot of other things, including the electricity and some trees. And ultimately, to finish the anecdote, they did postpone the wedding. But in terms of our impacts up here, we're combining potentially one of the worst wind events from a tropical system on record here in Atlanta with a rainfall event that parallels one that happened in 2009 at the Six Flags area here just to the west of Atlanta. Historic flooding that people to this day, anyone who was here for it remembers it. It went on for days. They picked up 12, 18 inches of rain from that. So we could have combined between the flooding and the wind two of the more historic events moving through our area simultaneously. The flooding is bad enough, but then when you throw the wind into it, you mentioned the mountains, Northeast Georgia mountains, some beautiful homes up there on the lakes, and a lot of trees. And there's going to be a lot of wind late Thursday night, Friday morning. So anyone up there under the gun, looking at some of the computer model information for 70-plus-mile-per-hour winds screaming in out of the southeast and east southeast as that storm gets closer to us. So it is one of those situations. I've been doing this for a long time where we never hype a storm. We always just try to tell you what's going to happen. And this is one where can't reiterate it enough that this, to me, feels like Atlanta's Sandy. And I say that because I was in the Northeast when Sandy happened, and it was about a week ahead of time, started to look at the computer models and say, well, that's an odd track for a tropical system, but there was a consistency to it among the computer models. And it was about a week ago that we started to look at this one and say, well, that would be a really bad track for us if that came to fruition. And the consistency was there. So we have a situation here where a storm is taking a track that it does not normally take. And people have likened it to Opal back in 1995, but that storm went up through Alabama, did not come straight up over Metro Atlanta. It was a Category 3, I believe, at landfall. This one is projected to be a Category 4. So the bottom line is here, I've been telling everyone and doing my best to make sure that people are as prepared as they can be. Hope for the best.
Yeah, exactly. Hope for the best, man, and prepare for the worst. Before I let you go, because I know you got a newscast coming up here, I want to ask you one more question. What about it's a hub of a lot of travelers, obviously, with the airport there and all the airlines flying into it. What's going on with that real quickly? If you can just give me a minute on that. This is going to be a big delay with airlines.
Without a doubt. And this is the busiest airport in the world here, Hartsfield-Jackson. Super efficient, I will say that. I have not heard of any closure notifications pending or anything along those lines. My guess is that the airport will technically stay open, but we will not see much in the way of air traffic between about 9, 10, 11 o'clock tomorrow evening and early Friday morning. We're expecting the worst winds to come moving over Atlanta 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning on Friday. One of the things about tropical systems is once they're gone, they're gone. So assuming the airport doesn't take damage, assuming there's electricity and everything is functioning at the airport, the weather should improve very quickly on Friday to just a breezy day. And as I said, they are super efficient. One of the things, Bob and Jamie, that you never really know is how are the airlines going to handle it? Because they don't necessarily want planes sitting on the tarmac here for days if there are major problems in Atlanta. So there will be residual impacts that'll be felt. So that's a question that I fielded a lot, Bob, in the last few days. Is I have a friend coming in, or I have, is someone's flying out, or can I make my flight? And I've been telling people if it's late Thursday or it's early Friday, probably isn't going to happen. After that, let's see what the impact is after the storm comes through.
Right, Kapine, we're gonna let you go. I appreciate your time. Excellent points and really good information there. We hope to do this again tomorrow. Again, we're going to continue on with this talk, though. I know you've got the business to do, Fred. Really good points, and we appreciate your time tonight to help explain what's going on.
Thank you so much for having me, Bob and Jamie, and you guys stay safe.
Yeah.
All right, you too. Stay safe is right. I think that's the key. And Jamie, you know, it's funny. You're going to experience the same thing we are in some respects. You got a storm surge. We got a storm surge. We got flooding. We could have some flooding. We're going to have tropical storm force winds and not hurricane force winds. So what have you been telling your folks to be doing out there during the height of the storm? I think I want to get that across to the people that, you know, it's important that they know that this is a serious situation.
So the height of the highest winds from Helene will be overnight, and hopefully people will be at home. I have a partner who works a third shift, so he's actually working from home. I'll be at the station, but people need to stay off the roadways. And honestly, today and yesterday, I really started saying we were going to have a 1-2 punch with this storm, because I anticipate the National Weather Service to put most of our viewing area under a tornado watch as early as tomorrow sunrise. And that'll last through a lot of the day. Any band moving in from Helene has the potential to produce a tornado. And so I think that's the scary unknown. We've been pretty consistent about our 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts, but that's going to be 11 p.m. through probably about 3 a.m. and then slack off as we head towards sunrise on Friday. But I think the day is the big kind of unknown with the heavy bands of rain, and we could have rain-wrapped tornadoes tomorrow.
Yeah, that is the scary part at nighttime too, obviously. And these tornadoes happen so quickly. I want people to know that there isn't a lot of warning time. And in a car or a vehicle or any kind of vehicle, it's very dangerous, because they are not the biggest and strongest tornadoes, but there are enough power and energy in them to turn cars over and to cause significant damage to structures too, on top of that. So the tornado warnings will happen quickly. And those tornadoes will be moving at an incredible rate of speed, to sometimes 40, 50 miles an hour. And there's little time to take warning. So you want to stay by your safe room and be able to duck into that. We've got a couple more people that joined us. Jamie, I want to introduce Yolanda, who is from Albany, I believe. And then that's, again, part of the Gray Media Group. And it looks like you are in for a serious ride, more so than Atlanta. How are you doing, Yolanda? And what is your take on the storm tonight? If you can hear me.
Can you hear me? Bruce Capps in New Orleans.
Okay, Bruce. Yes. Hey, Bruce, how are you? We'll get back to Yolanda. I think Yolanda just dropped off there. But anyway, Bruce, how's it going in New Orleans? You guys are watching this from a distance, obviously.
Right.
And seeing what's happening. A pretty amazing storm. What's your take on the storm itself, and how you guys feeling after your big storm, too?
Right. We just went through Francine, and fortunately it kind of dried out on the southern end, but we had a lot of flooding. We're below sea level, and that's a major issue. But I was going to mention to Atlanta that the New Orleans Saints are playing the Falcons in Atlanta Sunday. So, you know, a lot of people are driving, you know, on I-10 and then heading north to Atlanta. And, you know, the message for me tonight has been, if you're driving to Atlanta, you really need to check in, because some of the roadways, as you start eastward, you may have trees down, you may have power outages. If you have an electric car, you may not have the ability to charge it. So that's kind of been my message. Fortunately, unfortunately, it's a storm that's got to hit somewhere. Hopefully it hits in the the kind of the wildlife refuges, the Big Bend, with hopefully not a lot of population, but it's landlocked and it's got to go somewhere. But my message has been that. I mean, the only really impact for us is going to be some high seas coming in off of the eastern boot of lower Plaquemines. We have parishes, you guys have counties. So we're going to have some gale warnings that affect just offshore. We're a very big fishing community, sportsman's paradise, and we do that. So naturally, boats don't go out. Let this thing go by. By Sunday, we'll start getting a reprieve. But really, on the back end, we're going to see some gorgeous weather. I feel it's kind of like that survivor's guilt. We went through Francine, which was bad, but we're going to actually get a front end and lower humidity and a little taste of fall for the first time in New Orleans.
Yeah, it's funny, Bruce. Bruce Katz, right? Bruce Katz from New Orleans. We got
WVOE.
Okay, Fox 8, right? Fox 8.
Yeah.
All right, Yolanda, can you hear us now?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Great points, by the way, Bruce, about the driving and going to the game. If Atlanta gets hit that hard, there are going to be some problems and issues traveling through Atlanta and through Albany as well. So keep that in mind. Take heed as far as that goes. And Yolanda, I know you're in the path of this thing. I think this is, as we heard earlier from, again, Fred, this could be a historic storm for Georgia.
Well, definitely so. We haven't had a storm of this magnitude to come into the area. I think the one that folks here remember is Matthew. And this is nothing like Matthew. It's going to be even more intense. And I guess what really boggled me a bit was the 5 p.m. advisory with a Cat 4 coming right into South Georgia, and which is, utterly amazing. And also the extensive size of the storm. It's expansive. So whether, we're in the direct path in terms of the eye coming on top of us or further off toward the east, I think the impacts are basically going to be the same. With any storm anyway, you can say, well, the storm is coming on top of you, but then the higher impacts are far away from the center of circulation. So it's going to be, heart-wrenching, and especially knowing what types of devastation can result as come out of this massive storm.
Well, what market are you in?
WALB in Albany.
Oh, in Albany, okay.
Yeah, Southwest Georgia.
Hopefully it'll weaken a bit. I mean, it's going to be moving quickly, so I think the impacts into almost Atlanta as a Cat 1. So moving over you guys, it's a fast mover. And being that strong, it's going to take a while to ramp down. So, you're right. You guys, you're in for it. And, it's interesting, to add to this, that this is the first year that the Hurricane Center put inland watches and warnings out. And I think that was a great move, because we always see it along the coast. And then now that you see with us, with Francine, our parishes, and you all with counties, it really kind of highlights that, oh, wow, my county is under a warning. So I think it heightens the attention level too.
Excellent point,
I surely
Bruce.
hope so, because we are under a hurricane warning right now. And I think, I tried to stress, this is something we've never had before. And, hopefully to heighten the urgency in being prepared.
I've never seen it before.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I've never seen that before, that hurricane warning that far into Georgia. And Jamie, I got to tell you that I think I see most of the state of Georgia is in blue. Indicating on my map, at least a tropical storm warning. So I think this could be the biggest storm in history, really, for Georgia, if it continues on that course.
Historically for the state, yes. All of our storms are basically based off of Hurricane Matthew, which was a Cat 2, which made a 12-mile glancing blow off of Tybee Island and made landfall just south of Charleston. So Charleston just 127 miles away from us. But yeah, so this is a historical storm, not necessarily as impactful as Matthew, but for the state, yes.
Yeah, and Bruce, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say, during Francine, the greater New Orleans area, Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish, some of the biggest populated parishes, I actually highlighted that and, said, if you're under that orange, that's our color palette for, the hurricane warning, that, you need to pay attention. And it's something I had to kind of educate the public on, that these inland warnings now are to bring a heightened alert as well. When you see it and you see your parish or county in it, I think it really, gives you more of a, wow, we really need to pay more attention to it than along the coast, because people would think, oh, along the coast it's going to be bad. But like in Georgia, it basically is up to the Tennessee border. The entire state is blue. And to me, when you see that, I think it heightens even people in central and north Georgia. It just heightens that alert of, wow, this could really be bad, as opposed to just, your counties with no flooded colors indicating a watch or a warning.
Great point. Great point. I got to tell you, Bruce, them doing that, and we are doing that obviously with the cone and all the different counties in our entire state. And we use blue for the tropical storm warning is in that. It used to be you see the cone with the, some symbol and you think, okay, we're out of the cone, we're okay. But no, this really highlights the fact. And I think people need to, and I think they're understanding that, hey, listen, the cone is good to let us know where the storm's going, but it's not as good to let us know what's going to happen because of that. And Yolanda, I got to tell you that we're praying for you there. It looks like you're going to take the brunt of the storm of all of us right here, and it doesn't look good. But I want to let people know who are watching this online streaming. We also broadcast it on our newscast, little pieces of it and snippets of it. I want people to know that they have a great team here in the Gray Network called the Gray Media Group, that if any of us lose power, that other stations in our network will pick up that signal and broadcast it to that local area. In fact, I know during some storms, we position people into other markets so that if we do lose power here or the ability to broadcast, that we can then use that facility of our network to broadcast to our local market the necessary information that they're going to need. And that's an excellent tool to have. Not a lot of stations have that ability. And I think it really is a thumbs up to the Gray Media Network and the Gray Media Group that we're able to do that.
Let me just give props to Yolanda, because Yolanda's been through a major tornado, Adele, Georgia. You've been through Michael, and now you're going through this, and little other tornado events that I'm sure were big for your community. But you are a pro, and everybody watching who is in your viewing area should be very grateful to have you, honestly.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, stay safe up there. Hey, you guys, I got to get going. This has been great. Again, if you're watching this, we're going to continue this as much as we can, obviously, through the storm and any other storms. And I think you guys have seen it. There's a couple of other storms out there trying to develop in the Atlantic, one with a real good chance developing. But I think, as you probably do as well, that the season is far from over, and we still have the possibility of big storms in the month of October.
Yay.
All right, guys. Y'all take care. Good luck. Good luck to you guys in the past.
Thank you. Thank you.